of the content block, if I change the location of a page to which I had linked, how does concrete5 know to recreate the cached output? Is that handled in the moving of that page somehow? Actually, that's a very good question. Currently, it's not. So what you would have to do, if the content block has a short enough lifetime, um, it will automatically recreate it periodically. I'm not sure what that cache lifetime constant is set up as. Yeah, so by default the lifetime is for as long as Ncache wants to keep it around, which is fairly long. So, um, so that is a good point. If you have your cache, if you have cache enabled and you are moving sites on your site, you will want to periodically clear your cache, or those content blocks won't be updated. Now, what I think might be a nice solution to make that more graceful in the future is something you're alluding to now. It would be cool if um, the content block could subscribe to page move requests, or I mean, we already have an on-page move event that could take care of detecting when pages are moved and actually delete content, refresh the cache on content blocks that reference those pages, and that wouldn't be that hard for us to implement, but it's not something that currently happens. So um, with the cached content block, you would want to clear the cache manually if you are moving pages on your site. And finally, I'm going to go through something that is a bit more advanced. Is a good thing to end on. It's probably going to it's a good segue for any last questions that you guys have. I want to talk a bit about um, blocks that require more than one table. So, as you've seen throughout all of these different demos, uh, concrete5 works pretty well for uh, making it very easy to store data in one database table. Um, automatically through our active record pattern. And I want to show how we store data for more complicated blocks. And a good example for this, I think, is the survey, because I just added it. You just got to see it in action. So the survey block is more complicated than your average concrete5 block. You not only have to store again. You not only have to store the information about the survey itself, like it's the question name, whether it's open to site visitors or not. You also have to store the different options, so the answers to the survey, and those have to be bound to the survey instance. And you also have to store the answers. So you're looking at 3 tables minimum here. And if I open up db.xml, you can see that is the case. The first table is just called BT survey. It is the table that is bound to the one instance of the block. So it has the BID field here, the block ID. It's where you store the question for that block. It's also where you store whether the survey requires registration. Next, we have a table called BT survey options. This is the table that stores the possible responses, the answers to a survey that you can choose. So you can see right here that the primary key of this table is option ID, and that BID is just another integer. This is what binds the options to a particular survey. So with this survey that we've added to this page, there's one entry in the BT survey table that has the question favorite letter, and then there are 3 options in the BT survey options table, A, B, and C. And we store the block ID in both to map the options back to the survey instance. Next, we have a BT survey results table. And this table stores all the selected survey results for a particular block. Again, you can see we use BID as the the reference point here. The primary key to this table is result ID. We also store which option you picked, of course. We also store the user ID, which is an optional thing that shows if we only store that if the user is actually logged in, of course. And then we also store IP address and timestamp. So if I log out and I clear my cookies, and come back to this, you can see I get the survey. We're going to walk through how this stores its data, because there's no magic. You're going to write database queries for this type of thing. View.php, first we check a function called hasVoted. This is this function checks to see whether you have a cookie that says that you voted or not. It also checks to see if you're registered. We bypass the cookie, and instead we look directly at the BT survey results table. So this is an example of us using this table just with the built-in ADODB database querying. So pretty quickly here, you're going to see that you're going to be writing your own database queries as opposed to having some kind of magic ADODB active record pattern that works across multiple tables. You know, you're free to implement other active record solutions that can do more stuff than ADODB, you know, more ORM functionality that actually takes care of joins and things like that. But we thought it would be easier for us to err on the side of if you really need that much control, you'd be better off writing the database queries. So if you have not voted, we get the question for the current thing, and we get the poll options. As you can imagine, what we're going to do here is poll options are going to query for the currently active block ID. It is going to query that survey table. So here we're returning this options. How do we get this options? Let's find out. So you can see every time we construct this block, we are actually storing the options as a block poll option class in the options array. So here we are querying the BT survey options for the currently active block ID. That block ID is always available from within this class, so you can kind of use it as your unique identifier across all the tables you're working with, and you'll easily have access to it. And we retrieve the options for the current survey, and then we print them out here. And then that gets us a form that works with the current survey. And then the next thing, the next step toward building interactive blocks is what we call an action, a form or a block action. And this is an interactive. This makes your block interactive, and it works with a post. So here you can see we've made this form method action form save vote, and this will be somewhat familiar to you if you have played around with concrete5's MVC syntax. It's a little different though. In some ways it's a little more limited, but and a little bit more locked down. So when you submit this form, what this basically is saying is I'm going to take a post and I'm going to submit this to the current page, and it is going to go into the block controller, and it is going to run a method based on this name. And since this is called form underscore save underscore vote, what it is actually going to run is a function called action underscore form save vote. Now this is a big difference between the block controller and the page controller. The page controller, if you were to run that, it would look in the page controller for a function called form save vote. Blocks, due to the way that they are and some of the methods that they have to expose, that was not secure enough. So we make it so that if you are going to make a function in a block controller that is meant to be run through an interactive process like that, you have to prepend it with action underscore. So we have action underscore form save vote, and this function automatically gets run whenever that form is submitted. So this is pretty simple. At this point, we get the currently active block object. We do some stuff here to make sure that's survey specific. Down here we check anti-spam stuff. This is all stuff. This is implementation details for this particular block. But you can see it's super easy. All we do is we take whatever you submitted and we insert a new entry into the BT survey results table, just using the ADODB library. And so there's no magic. You do have to write your own database query for this stuff, unlike the other examples of blocks. But it's not too difficult to do, and that's really how the survey block works. And then beyond that, we redirect back to the current page with a get parameter that says that the user voted in survey. So once I vote for C. Now my has voted returns true because I have this cookie. And then we run some special stuff. We actually use the Google Charts API for this. So this is more implementation details. But we run that get poll options function, and we send that data off to Google Charts in the format that they require. Again, though, this is all just methods that you can define in a very custom way in your block controller. Once you get into blocks that are interactive like this, we really try and stay out of your way and let you code them the way that you see fit. You can see that when this block is deleted, we actually implement the delete function in this controller, because by default, when the block is deleted, it will just delete the one row from the BT survey table, because that is the BT table. But since we actually have more than one block table, we actually implement this in addition to the parent delete function. So we make sure to clean up after ourselves by deleting from BT survey options and from BT survey results. Similarly, if you have a block that has multiple tables involved in it, you want to implement the duplicate function. This automatically gets run at certain points behind the scenes, not just when you explicitly copy a block. You need to implement the duplicate function because it automatically gets run whenever you're making a new version of a page and you're editing a block. You're actually duplicating that block behind the scenes and assigning it the new block ID. So the duplicate function always takes a new block ID parameter, and you can then copy all the data you need from your old tables into the new, into the same tables with the new block ID. So you can see here, whenever this duplicate method runs, we get our current options, and we insert duplicated versions of those options into the BT survey options table with the new block ID. Same way with the VT survey results into there. And if you, that means if you don't implement this, what you might find, if we were to forget to implement duplicate, let me clear my, actually if I log in, if I were to, let's take a look at the versions on this page. So I'm looking currently at the at an approved version of the page. If I were to edit this and add a new option, actually, that's not that good of an example. If I were to edit this and add a new option or change the name of an option, what's going to happen is if I don't implement duplicate, the page is going to reload and I'm not going to have any options for my survey. Because what happens is when I make a new version of a page by editing a block, we duplicate the old block and then we make changes to it. So if you just make changes to a block but you don't implement all the different duplication functionality that you need to really completely remake a block based on an old block, you're going to run into weird places where a block looks fine, looks great, you approve a page, then you edit that block, and then all of a sudden it's empty in certain spots. That is a classic example. That is a classic, if you ever see that, you definitely want to take a look at making sure that your duplicate routine is duplicating all the data that it needs to reconstitute a block with a new block ID. Oscar is asking about settings pages in the dashboard. I'm not totally clear on what you're asking, but this is but we can get to it in a second because I want to walk through a little bit about how the survey block works to show its dashboard interface. Faust asks, can you walk through this example of the duplicate method? Sure, can definitely do that. So again, with simple blocks, that only use one database table, you do not have to implement this method at all. But since the survey block has 3 database tables, 2 that aren't the sort of core BT survey table, we need to implement it. So the duplicate method in your block controller always comes with just one parameter, and that's the block ID of the newly created block. It's just an integer. It's not a new object. And you are working, the current object is the existing block, and the new block ID is the ID of the block that will be new. So when you're in the duplicate method, you're in the scope of the existing block. And the only thing you know about the new block is what its ID will be. And that's okay, because all you need to do is make sure that all tables in the in your blocks, all of your multiple database tables, have the same data from the old block with the new block ID. So here's what we're doing. First, we know that we have a BT survey. When doing this, it's helpful to look at what tables you have. So BT survey, we don't have to worry about that table because that will be dealt with when we run parent duplicate new BID, because the core BT table, this one up here, that sort of magic active record table, if the duplicate method in the parent block controller gets run, that table will be duplicated no problem. So we don't have to worry about that. So if we didn't include this, we would have to duplicate it. But since we are running duplicate on the parent object, we don't have to worry about that table. So we're done with that one. The next table we have is BT survey options. This stores all the options that are against the current survey. So what we do, we know we want to duplicate those from the old block into the new one. So we already have the current options for the current survey, because every time we work with this survey block, those options get automatically added. Those options automatically get populated because they're in the constructor. So every time you have a survey block, controller, object, you have an array of options that correspond to the options for that survey, because that happens up here. So we don't have to do a select statement from BT survey options, because it's already in this options array. So we loop through those, and those are instances of the block poll option class down here. We loop through those, and we just insert them again in the BT survey options table. But we make sure to bind the new BID to the BID column in BT survey options. So what this is really doing is, if I were to edit this and it's A, B, C, when I duplicate it, it's already going to have A, B, and C, and it's going to loop through them and reinsert A, B, and C into BT survey options, but it's going to give it a new block ID that corresponds to this new BID. So that when I reload this page after editing it, this block is going to have a new numerical ID, because that's the way versioning works. So if I don't make sure that my new block ID has the same options by doing this here, I'm going to have no options. And the next thing I can do is, every time that we are looping through for each option, we are also going to get all of the selected results for that option in the BT survey results table, because this is how we have to take care of our final database table here. We have to make sure that all of the existing results get changed. Otherwise, if we didn't do this, anytime you edited a survey, that survey would have it would reset the option count, the selected options. And obviously you don't want to do that, because if you're just fixing a typo, it would be too bad if you lost all of your survey data. So here we are looping through, getting all of the survey results for each option, and then we are reinserting that exact same data into the BT survey results, but with oh, actually, let's see, this works a little differently. Since we aren't actually using the block ID column in the BT survey results table. Since the option ID is the primary key in BT survey options, every time we insert a new option in the BT survey options, we are getting a new option ID as our auto increment value, and then we use this new option ID in our BT survey results table. So this is primarily MySQL data modeling stuff, but it's important to know that you have to do it. Tom asks, does the duplicate function also take care of using the clipboard? Yes, because when the clipboard is interesting, because when you're actually copying and pasting data using the clipboard, you are referencing the same block ID throughout the site. So you're actually not duplicating anything when you're using the clipboard, even though it says explicitly copy and paste, because you're just using a pointer to the original block. But then if someone comes along and edits one of the original copies, that will create a new block ID, which will then be, both blocks will exist, but the copied version will be the same as the previous version. It will have lost its link to the original one. But yes, they all all that stuff is managed behind the scenes. Tom asks, is there a way of excluding a block from versioning? If you have a large number of tables and data, I can see getting quite slow if you edit something. That's a good question. There is, although we don't publicize it because for reasons that you might imagine, it's a little potentially dicey. But yes, there is. If you in your block, there is a function, or there is a internal variable that you can define in your class. I don't think we actually do this in any blocks on concrete5 in concrete5 core. But if you go into your block controller and up here where you define all your other stuff, you say public BT include all equals true. That will create your block in your database table with this BT include all set to 1 instead of 0. And what that means is that block will be completely excluded from versioning. So include all means this block type is always up to date in all versions. So that gets a little weird, of course, as you're editing blocks on a page that you're editing blocks on a page that are their version, but then you edit one, and then all of a sudden, everywhere you change it, it's changed. But yes, that will disable a block from being versioned, and then if you're editing version 10 and you change that block, it will create a new page version, but rolling back to the previous version of the page will change everything about that version back except the one block that you've disabled versioning. And yeah, that can be handy sometimes. Finally, I wanted to just step through the survey's reports page. So this is in the dashboard, the concrete5 dashboard. This is a completely, this is a single page that's very custom for the surveys results page, but it uses functionality found in the blocks. And I just wanted to point this out because it's a good example of where where blocks start to be, we're used to working with blocks in this one specific context of the of concrete5 as a visual thing. But any of these blocks that store data that you want to have accessible in a reporting interface, you can get that data out, using all sorts of different ways. So, in the controller for the surveys page in the dashboard, we load up the survey block. That doesn't mean we don't get any UI or anything when we do this. All this does is load up the controller file for the survey block. It's just a simple way of it's just a shorthand way of getting all the classes found in here. And what's cool about that is it lets you keep all your block-specific data, like the block poll option class, etc. It lets you keep all that stuff in the controller.php, but then easily use it throughout the rest of your site. So here we grab a list of surveys based on the database item list here. It's a very complicated query that we don't have time to go into now. But when I click on this, you can see I get data for who selected what, and that's running the view detail. It's running the view detail function in my controller, and I just wanted to show it because we're still using the same functions that in the block controller that we use on the front end of the site display chart, which is nice because it's really nice because the MVC syntax of concrete5 lets that be pretty um, it lets that be pretty flexible. So when we're viewing the detail here in the single page in the dashboard, we are running this function, which ultimately contacts Google and gets all this data, and then it sets this function called this variable called pie chart, which is then shown when you're showing this as a block in the front end. Where is it? I thought it was. Maybe we're not using this except in the back end. But what you could do is you could reuse the same function in both the block controller in both the block and in the dashboard that talks to it. But we're not actually doing that here. We're just running display chart from within the single page. But it queries the database. It sets this stuff all from within a class in the block controller, which is referenced in the page controller for the survey's results page. So, this is getting a little bit complicated, but I just want to show this off as an example of a block that is primarily front end focused, but the same functionality is being used in the block controller to show data on the in the page, and it's also being used again to show data in the reporting interface in the dashboard that talks to it. So when you're dealing with data heavy blocks and you're building interfaces to show it, a lot of those same functions can be reused in both contexts. Faust asks, how does the dashboard only get a list of the current versions of surveys and only also get the previous versions of the same, and not get the old ones? That is handled a couple different ways. So this survey list class extends the database item list class, and if you have interest in using that, I would advocate taking the advanced application development because it's a handy class to understand. This list is basically a complicated database query that populates this list here, and you can see what we're doing here is we are actually running a fairly complicated query that takes care of what you're asking. So this particular line here makes it so that we are only showing page versions that are approved, and then all the joins here that join up to this make it so that we're only showing blocks that appear on approved versions of pages. And then we're also grouping by the block ID so that we don't show multiple ones if they happen to show up across different pages. And we're also getting some custom info to handle the last response and number of responses. We're using some subqueries to do that. So you can see here that this subquery here is actually responsible for getting number of responses there. So that's how that works. Yeah, it's with the amount of version control that there is, it's a little challenging. And this also, you know, what we're trying to do here is you could just completely get a list of all the data in the BT survey table, and that would get you a list of surveys without, you know, nearly as much pain. But the problem is, anytime you made a new version of a survey, they would also show up. So that's why, excuse me, that's why we don't do that. Instead, what we do is we first get it from BT survey, then we join it to page version collection version blocks, and then we use that to join to collection versions, and we filter that down to only the approved versions. That's how you have to go. That's how you can filter down only blocks that are found on an approved version of a page. Yeah, we will. Matt is involved in taking all of these trainings and making videos for them. And when the video for this is ready, he will send out a link to everyone who took this training. No problem. Well, we're probably not going to get to all of those questions. A few of those are actually questions that are much more applicable in the basic block development, to be honest with you. Um, like the JS folder, as we went through in the basic block development. The JS folder and the CSS folder in the block's root directory, or in the directory for a block, or its custom template. Uh, that Any CSS or JavaScript that you include in the CSS or JS directories will automatically get loaded up in the header of a page when it is when it's rendered. And that's probably the best practice for implementing other JavaScript libraries in blocks. Um, you know, to a point that will work. If you're doing some really complicated JavaScript libraries that conflict with jQuery, you're probably going to have trouble to the point where it might work if you display the block. It might work if you display the block like a placeholder for that block when you're logged in, maybe. But you know, if it's not compatible with jQuery, it's going to probably be a problem. How do you implement Ajax into a block? What you're going to want to do is take a look at block tools. We went through this a bit in the basic block development course. But tools is a folder that holds sort of simple scripts that you know, can handle Ajax, and it basically is a way to include scripts with blocks that don't have a UI component necessarily. They could if you want, but they don't have to. And you can communicate with them from the view layer of a block and do some Ajaxy stuff there. And if you want to look a little bit more into that, there's a free block in the marketplace that is useful for a JavaScript and Ajax standpoint. Oh, man. Find it. Don't know why that doesn't show up. Yeah, so the likes this block, if you can find that in the marketplace, this is used in a how-to. Um, that this gives a really good example of how to use tools, how to do stuff behind the scenes. So the view for this block is shows something like this. If you click I like it, it actually in page charts that stuff and keeps track of who likes what behind the scenes. And the how-to that goes with it is oh, that's great. Don't know why that got moved around. Should probably update that particular thing. This walks through all of the different tool stuff that you're going to need to work with. And so this is the perfect example of how to use. There's a couple different methods of doing Ajax, so I would highly recommend reading this how-to and downloading the likes of this block. Faust asks if you can roll back a page to get a previous version of one block but not the other. We do store all of the different versions in the database, so you could the data is there to roll back one block but not the rest. But the way that versions of pages are stored, the page version is a snapshot of all the particular blocks approved on that page at that, or that they're not even approved, all the particular blocks placed on that page at that time. So if you roll back to a previous version of the page, you get whatever blocks were on that page at that time. But all the different versions of blocks are in the database there, so the data is there, but the way versioning works is it's a snapshot of a whole bunch of blocks at one time. So through the UI, there's no way to roll back just one block. You have to you roll back a full page the way it looks. And we'll get to a couple more questions and probably call it quits. If you are interested in working with concrete5 on a mobile platform, I would highly recommend downloading there's a mobile theme switcher in the marketplace. It's free. This it probably does a bit more than maybe what you want. It actually takes care of loading up an alternate theme for mobile browsers if you enable that. But you don't have to enable that. And if you don't, you can still enable the package, and it will set a constant that you can detect in your code, and to let you know if a mobile browser is visiting your site. And then in your blocks view template, you can actually check to see if that constant is there and defined. And if it is, you can render different code for different devices. And that's probably how I would do that. I think the link is now in the chat. That's helpful. I'll actually
put a few other things that I found in the chat as well. This is a great next step toward building. It's a super simple block, but should give you a good understanding as to how you might approach Ajax in block view layers. And I think if that probably does it for this training. There's a lot of stuff that we covered, definitely. I feel like the started off simple and manageable, and then by the end with the surveys got a little challenging. But you know, if you're working with multiple database table blocks, I would highly recommend the survey as a place to start. I would not recommend the form block as a place to start, simply because it's one of the most complex blocks we've ever built, but it's probably too complex to jump into. You can also start with the slideshow block. That's a very good one to start with for working with a list of images as we went through. It's also good because there's only 2 database tables with that one. The sort of core database table for the block, and then the additional list of selected images for a slideshow. So that's a good one to start with too. But yeah, the survey one is good because it's you're storing data. You've got multiple options, but it's something that you can manage. You can wrap your mind around pretty easily. There are only 3 database tables. And I think other than that, that about does it. I think Matt will have this video up in a few days, maybe a week, maybe less. And it's got all your email addresses. So I just saw one got sent out the other day, so I'm sure this one will be out pretty soon. And then make sure to write down those links as well for any further reading that you want to do. And hope everyone enjoyed the training. And I wish it was 10 o'clock. Well, I don't necessarily wish it was 10 o'clock at night, but having a beer right now doesn't sound too bad. Alrighty, thanks everybody.